We got one song, we got two songs, we got three, we got hits. You want some more hits? Here they come. This is called Sexy Time. Looking at my Gucci, it's sexy time. Rock around the clock, it's sexy time. Take a look in. Keep on checking.
Hello, all you skibbies. This is Great Answer, and you are once again listening to the Kink, Sex, and Culture podcast. I'm going to do a pretty hurried intro today, both because I am getting set to head off to the wilds of Missouri for the RSG campout with Naya and her favorite book, Ozma of Oz. We are going to be presenting 3 classes for them at their rope skill group, which is really going to be fun. And then I will be going next week to the Consent Summit, which is in New York City. And you can find out about that by looking on the NCSF website, ncsfreedom.org. And that will be a lot of high-level discussions about consent in the scene and, you know, the kind of stuff that I do. And frankly, that's what this podcast is about. But it's about it from a different perspective. That's the high-level academic kind of stuff. This is from the boots-on-the-ground perspective. I'm really happy to have Ozma, who wrote a great thing, and you'll hear about that in a little bit. But before I do that, I need to take a moment to thank my sponsors. And my sponsors come in 2 different flavors. They come from commercial sponsors, which are people like Twisted Monk. And twistedmonk.com makes really great hand-conditioned and dyed rope, custom dyed rope. And along with other things, I just finished packing up my monk sack, for example, to take it to RSG. And I was able to fit a full rope kit, including reinforced uplines, a large wooden ring, a pair of sap gloves, knife, large knife, postcards for the upcoming events like Ropecraft, and also the GRU. And I did all that stuff in a very nice and burrito-flavored, I say burrito-flavored because it wraps up, sack. And I really like that. Now, this month, and you will, if you're hearing this podcast, if you are one of those people who gets the podcast delivered and you really want to do it, this is where you should pause the podcast. Well, not yet, because I haven't told you why. But what you should do is go to rope.greatanswer.com, which will send you right into Twisted Monk's website, but through our affiliate portal, which will be nice because it helps me get more rope. And then go to the color of the month, because the color of the month is called Teacher's Pet. And I remember I got the email and I thought, Teacher's Pet, that doesn't make any sense. And then I looked at it and it was sort of a bright orangey color, really vibrant. And I'm like, okay, I was thinking some kind of pumpkin spice flavor of the month or something like that. But no, this is how clever Monk's mind is. He has Teacher's Pet is in memory of those yellow pencils, the number 2 pencils that we got in school. It's just about exactly that color. So if any kind of school play type things is your thing, this is the rope for you. But it goes really fast, which is why you should now pause, go to rope.greatanswer.com and click on the color of the month and get that. You can also find a link to the color of the month on the Kink Sex Culture podcast page, which is kinksexculture.com. Our other sponsor is Lee Allure. Now, Lee is an interesting, polymath. That would be the way to put it. As in, she's good at so many different things. Professionally, she's a hypnotist and not only has helped me with regular stuff like memory, but also provides erotic hypnosis and training and sessions and things like that. Recently, she's gotten into soap. Yeah, soap. And one of the cool things that she's done is she's invented a brand of soap called Spiral Eye Soap. I've been telling her she should totally do a hypnosis thing to go along with the soap, like as you scrub your body, you are getting deeper into trance or something like that. She hasn't quite gotten that far yet, but maybe that's because I don't know as much about hypnosis as she does. Anyway, it's interesting because in addition to her soap hobby, after all of the floods in Houston, she was packaging her soap up to send it off for relief. And as it happens, Monk's Color of the Month, 20% of the proceeds are going towards hurricane relief. So both of these sponsors, not only are they sponsoring my podcast, which is a very helpful thing to keep it free for you, they also are helping out. So I would appreciate if you'd pay them a visit at leeallure.com or twistedmonk.com, or go to rope.greatancer.com, and that will send you right to the right place. You can also be a sponsor of mine by going to patreon.com/greatanswer and signing up. For as little as $1 a month, you get backstage access to various things like my notes and things like that. And you also get to know that you are helping keep this thing going and keep me out and about interviewing interesting people like Ozma. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to my interview with Ozma. So I'm really glad to have on, through the magic of Skype and the miracles of modern technology and the wonders of daycare, my dear friend, book, lover, we have so many different roles that we fill with each other. And, roles rhymes with holes. So, Ozma of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Aside from working with me and Gray Miller Creative to create events and being the assistant director of both the Ropecraft and the upcoming Flow Erotic event, and also being my Serva's favorite book, and many other things, and one of my oldest friends in Kinkin as well, you are a talented writer. And a very prolific writer, and you wrote a thing.
I did write a thing.
And I have it pulled up here, the exact title. Yes, The Accused in the Case of a Consent Incident, which is a very official and scary kind of sounding title. What was the motivation behind writing this?
So, at my very first Ropecraft, I helped lead the registration team, and I got to know a number of nice, young, new to kink people. And after that event, about 6 months later, I was talking to one of them, and one of them was talking to me like I was famous, which, if you know me, is pretty funny because I am really a zero-trick pony, and I am not famous. I try very hard not to be famous. I don't really do anything. I don't want to be famous, but I realized pretty quickly that people don't get to choose their own privilege. We don't get to determine how people view us. And she was treating me differently based on her perception of who I was and what my role was. And if you've stuck around in public kink for any amount of time, you sort of see these waves of people rising and falling in fame based on what they do. Some things are good, some things are not so good. And at this point, it's a pretty old topic to mention that, but I started thinking about that in relation to me and what might happen if I did something wrong. Would I hear about it from people? How could I make myself an approachable person so that if something did happen, I would be able to act how I wanted to and uphold my values in a situation that wasn't so good, as well as, coming up with all of the fun, hot stuff that we get to do when everything's great. So that's where that came from. It surfaced in recent times because, a friend of ours and a presenter at our event and many other events, I think probably most of the big events out there, at least in Rope, turned out to have some ongoing consent-related issues that were very quiet. So I didn't think that I would.
It was well timed to have a resurgence, and I actually feel a little guilty because you apparently had sent me a link that I had not had the time to follow, and I think you thought because of that it wasn't a good idea.
That's true. Or at least that it wasn't going to be something useful. And I sent it to you, not necessarily, and although I sort of am kind of puppy-like for you, and I like to show you things I've written for lots of things, dear editor. I love doing that. But for this one, I sent it to you in official capacity as, hey, we're running something together. I am helping you with this. And if something ever happens involving me, this is how I would like to be. I put it out there as a promise to you and to anyone who is reading it on the public internet as a way to help hold myself to those things that I personally had said and thought through, because I probably wouldn't be feeling like it in the moment if something had happened.
Yeah,
So,
in the moment, I think that there's a lot of destruction that happens because people are scared, they're defensive, and it's impossible to react appropriately. In fact, I recently talked with someone who they felt bad because their reaction to learning of some consent issues was to go and sit down and just read a book and just like pull themselves away from everything. And when they said that, I was like, wow, that's actually, I'm thinking of the other reactions I've seen, people demanding to know who it was, or people writing half-assed apologies, or people writing what I call a no-apology.
Yep.
Which is just not an apology. Or, he didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't do the go off and, file a lawsuit against the person who was accusing them. I mean,
yes.
there was of all the things, it's like, wow, removing yourself from the situation and putting yourself in a situation where, one, you can calm down, and two, you're not going to harm anybody else. That seems brilliant.
Yes. And uncommon.
Right, exactly. And I'm part of the reason I bring this up is because I think that'd be a great model for a response, is, calm yourself the fuck down. Do you think that having something like this prepares you to perhaps be able to recover? Like, if you found yourself in that and you're like, oh my God, what do I do? You suddenly have this, oh wait, I wrote down what I was going to do. Let's read that. Let's take a look and see, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And that kind of thing. Is that part of it?
Absolutely. So when I was in the process of writing this, I decided to write it down after I sat with, for probably a couple weeks, the incredibly uncomfortable possibility that I could be at fault in a consent incident. I could be a consent violator. Me. Not somebody else, not this being everybody else's problem where everyone writes this very smart essay about how everyone else needs to do something and this will all be okay, but just sort of starting at home. And I went through all of those the very basic, the fear reaction, the denial, the trying to weasel out of it, trying to think about all the ways that I could actually not be at fault when I could possibly be at fault, even just when this was a theoretical me sitting on my porch by myself. So when I sat down to write it, I found that the process of doing that was incredibly helpful for having a plan that makes me feel more prepared. I feel more confident to go out and interact with people, knowing that I at least have thought through what I would like to do if something happens. And I mean, something could happen to all of us. So absolutely, I think I'm more prepared.
Yeah, honestly, I think part of the work that we need to do is, I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but because I think the fact that we are so uncomfortable with the idea that we have the potential to be involved in a consent issue, that we tend to shy away from it. Absolutely. It's like, I don't want to think about it. And I mean, there's any number of things that we avoid thinking about in this world because we want it to go away. And I feel like part of this is making it more, not making it more acceptable, but perhaps having a more nuanced reaction as a group to the things that happen, so that when something happens, people don't have to immediately either assume that their world is over or they have to try desperately to do damage control.
Yes.
Instead, it can be not damage control, but it's actually starting to work towards a solution.
Well, absolutely. And if it were to become a standard practice for people to be able to deal with these things openly and in a more nuanced sort of way, somewhere on the continuum between I love you, you're wonderful, I want to be you, and fuck you, you can't come to my anything ever again. If I see you on the street, I'll turn around and walk the other way quickly.
I wouldn't piss in your mouth if your teeth were on fire.
Yes. So it's the fact that it's so polarized. It really leaves there's a lot of fear in the middle because nobody wants to be the person who did anything wrong. And if we all step up to the idea that, yes, we could in fact do something wrong before we do it, we'll both be more prepared for that. And I think probably be, as a community, a more realistic community. I don't think perfection is a standard that we can attain. And I think it's fairly obvious from the public internet that we're not doing it. So,
yeah, well, I mean, it's probably obvious from general culture. I mean, it's not like the kink scene or even the rope scene is any different than the rest of Western culture. I mean, you don't have to go too far to find evidence of rape culture.
Absolutely.
And for those that say, but rapists are punished, I just say Brock Turner,
yep.
Or President Trump, or a number of other things.
This is true.
So, and besides, let's throw a quick definition out there for those who may not be familiar with it. Rape culture is not talking about rape. It is talking about the conditions which make rape more likely to occur.
Right.
So it's a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? I mean, how do you see this being implemented? I mean, you put it up for yourself, but I mean, if you only intended it for yourself, you could have just kept it in your journal. Happy thoughts of you writing in your journal.
Aww.
Sorry. Okay. back to business. So you could have just done that, but you put it up publicly. I mean, are you hoping that other people adopt this?
I am hoping that other people adopt it. I'm not really in a position to recommend it to anyone myself as a person. I think I opened by what I wrote.
Says the director of two of the largest kink events in the United States.
And the person who sat on your porch saying, I think we should get the presenters to do this. I think it would be a good idea. The reason that it's public for me is not necessarily for adoption purposes, because at that point I was telling other people to do it, but because I wanted it to be a public promise that if something happened involving me, both I could sit there reading the thing that I wrote with my goals, and somebody else could sit there reading the thing with my goals and then looking at what I'm doing and then saying, hey, does this match? That for me is a really powerful motivator. My word is the most important thing I have, which I think is probably why I'm a book.
I see what you did there.
So there's that. But absolutely, if I had quiet wishes at that point, I would wish that everyone would do it just because I found it so useful. For Ropecraft and the presenters, because they represent us, whether they or we like it or not. I mean, we run an event and we choose educators and we give them a platform to speak on. And one thing I would be extremely excited to see would be knowing that those presenters, especially going forward in the future, considering some of the recent past, that those presenters are aware that they are fallible, that they are doing things to mitigate their own power structures, whether or not you say, I am not a role model, it doesn't matter. Because you are, and you don't get to pick whether or not you are. If you become an educator, you are teaching people how to do things that you know. So if you're teaching on consent, you need to clean house and have reasonable personal policy. And you need to, I think everybody, public face or not, needs to be aware that they could be at fault and able to maturely handle that in order to do what we do.
Cool. Well, at this point, I'm going to play the actual essay because we've been talking around it and the listeners haven't actually heard it yet. And then we'll come back at the end of it for a few follow-up questions, if that's okay.
Absolutely. That sounds wonderful. I'm so glad we found a reader because I love the message and I'm not much of one myself. So I would much rather have people enjoy what I wrote in a voice that is a professional. So thank you to that.
Well, While I also am grateful to Ryzen for doing that, I'm afraid it had more to do with the fact that I don't have time to edit another thing. So her being able to just deliver it to me already edited made a huge difference in having it available out. So yes, all credit given and appreciated to Ryzen. Here we go.
All right.
The accused. In the case of a consent incident. Everybody loves to hate the bad guy. It's easy and it feels good. It feels less good when those cartoon villains end up being people I know, people I like, maybe even me. I put some thought into what I would like to have happen if I were to be accused of a consent violation in a consent incident. As an extension of that, I sketched out what I would and would not do for someone in friendship in that situation. I hope that by considering myself in the role of the accused as well, that I'm preparing myself to make better choices than I otherwise might in a heated moment. I also hope that people will consider following my example and make their own personal codes. Okay, here goes. I stand as an open book in the glowing screens of public internet scrutiny to make two potentially alarming claims. First, I'm capable of violating another person's consent. Second, under some circumstances, I have an interest in maintaining my friendship with you if you have. There are many factors involved. There have to be. But what if will likely be met with, well, then, I am a book, not a library. And I'm using a lot of words in writing this already. If someone wrote the definitive guide to proper behavior in consent incidents, I would buy that book in a heartbeat and masturbate to their genius nightly forever. This is not that guide. I enter this dialogue at a low station with no professional credentials or special qualifications, except an understanding that humanity can be dark and complicated, and people can make mistakes. I feel that by excluding myself and people I care about when I consider these things, that I make this a problem about other people, when it's not. This is not about them, but about us. These are my personal traffic directions and aspirations. This is what I hope to hold myself to, and I feel that I drastically increase my chances of doing so by making these statements public. If you're curious, I don't censor comments, unless you make me scroll past an ASCII penis or it's unrelated. If I am accused of a consent violation, I preemptively and publicly accept the possibility of being, myself, at fault in a consent incident and needing to make changes in my life as a result. Red. I will not act to silence the accuser, nor will I stand by quietly watching anyone else do so. I want to know what they have to say. I want them to both be and feel heard, and I support their right to speak. I will not be intimidated into silence. We all speak at different volumes due to our circumstances. My voice is quiet already. I also have a right to speak, and you can expect me to use it. I will not tell you what you should do for me in an incident where my character is under examination, nor will I ask. Yellow. I might be hurt, shocked, saddened, angry, or any combination of complicated emotions. And while I will try to do my best at all of this, my best might not be very good. I might appreciate and draw strength from the knowledge that I would have friendships that would survive my having critically failed, especially if you have intentions of supporting me as I strive to accept any consequences, make changes, and do better in the future. Green. I will participate in dialogues about the incident as a vulnerable and fallible person suspected of and capable of making poor decisions. I will share my thoughts and recollections as respectfully as I can in space that is mine to speak in, and where I am invited to have a voice. I will share your information about an incident concerning me on my own social media platforms. If you write to warn people about me, I will help with that. I want to do this in a way that is ethically acceptable. I believe this is the only way for people like us to do what we do. I will encourage you to consider supporting respectful and potentially healing or productive dialogue if they're possible in the way that is appropriate for you to do so given your morals, values, and circumstances. I will stand as humbly as possible in my flawed humanity, doing the best that I can to learn, process, understand, and improve where I can, regardless of the details or resolution of the accusation. I will accept that some things may change as a result of the incident just because it happened, regardless of outcome. Concerning consent incidents and my involvement in ropecraft, I'm drawn to responsibility and gathering community, and am not uncommonly involved in leadership. I dislike power or status, and hold what I do have lightly and carefully. If a consent incident involving me would come to pass at ropecraft, I would ask to involve the Consent Rocks team, available to all of us, attendees and otherwise, to help support the situation and facilitate the best possible resolution and outcome. I'm proud to be a part of the event that created them and see the value of their presence. I would happily and humbly accept their assistance should I find myself involved in an incident. As for my role as a sidekick organizer with various jobs and duties, I hope between what I have written above and what I'm about to write below, that I can assure you of my regard for you as a fellow human being, regardless of circumstance. I both commit to being respectful and humane to all parties involved in consent incidents personally, and support ropecraft management as difficult and absolutely necessary decisions related to ethically and safely running a large event are made. Now for the harder read for you, dear friend. If you, as my friend, are accused of a consent violation, I preemptively and publicly declare my intent to continue, or change, or end friendships with folks involved in consent incidents at my own discretion. Red. I will not simply end our friendship upon hearing that you might have made a mistake or poor judgment call, nor will I forget that history, context, and perspective matter. I will not defend your actions as I understand them for you if I was not personally present for the incident. I will support you in using your own voice and being heard should you want to speak. I will not speak to the character of other persons involved or shout my disbelief in their claims, even if that is what my mind runs to for comfort in the moment. If I wasn't there, I don't know. I will not use my surprise or doubt to shame or silence them. Yellow. I might need to step back from the situation. I'm a partner violence and trauma survivor and bring my own baggage and perspective with me. Sometimes it is helpful, and sometimes it is not. I have no ability to predict. I might need to continue our friendship in a different way in the future and set some limits on how we interact because I value my safety. I might not support some of your actions or deeds if you confide in me. I am not an unconditional cheerleader, but I'll support our connection of friendship as we both bumble through life making our best efforts. Green. I will listen to you without advising unless you ask me to, and make my best attempt to support you as my friend while also taking care of myself. I will, in friendship, respect your privacy and our confidences with two exceptions. First, I follow protective ideals similar to mandatory reporting guidelines, because I believe society should shelter certain groups of people. Children, for example, from some things. Second, I cooperate fully with law enforcement as self-care and care for my loved ones. You, as my friend, will understand that. If not, let's talk. I will share my recollections of you as my friend, with your permission, with someone who asks me about you. I will share my views and perspective without making a sales pitch, negatives included, and I will tell them bluntly that my personal experience in no way negates any other ones. This isn't how that works. Charming is a verb, not a noun or adjective. I will support you getting your life back on track if I have the resources to do so, including if your path leads you to make changes in your life, including apologies and reparations if necessary and possible. I will step away if my attempts to support you are enabling problematic behavior. I will do my best to be a force for good in all circumstances, those I have thought of and those I have not. Thanks for reading. This is a reference point for the future. Considering that I plan to spend the next half a century running around pantsless as kinky comic relief, I thought it would be good to put out there. I didn't think, given the time and date of this initial writing, that I would need any of this so soon. Your fallible friend, Ozma of Oz by L. Frank Baum. P.S. If you do any intentionally shady shit to me or my family, I will drag the story from one end of the public internet to the other and back with quiet conviction. References upon request.
And there we went. All right. So one of the things about this is as I was listening to it, I was wondering if you are looking at this as people should adopt exactly what you put, or is this something where people have to fill in the red, greens, and yellows with their own ideals? I mean, if somebody puts it out there and they have something different, and they're like, "Hey, if you're accused, I'm gonna throw you to the wolves," and that's what they want to say. Is that still useful?
I think that is still useful. Absolutely. I think it needs to be personal. The process of making your own code, I think, is probably was for me the most valuable part of this. It's not necessarily what I said. It's that I gained the self-awareness that I could do something wrong and started looking at those hard cases before everything's on fire and I'm standing in the hard cases. Because that's not necessarily where most people really bring their A game. So
yeah, it's not the place you want to be making the decisions.
Yeah. So absolutely, I think a personal code would be useful. And in the case that somebody's personal code doesn't say exactly what I would say or exactly what I would do, I mean, these are personal and that's okay. I mean, I might look at something like that and maybe choose to interact more or less with somebody based on whether they fit my category of someone I would feel safe around. But
well, I think you did a good job in several places in there to say that, this is anything I say in here is subject to context and situation, so somebody couldn't come up to you and go like, well, I know I know I'm accused of this thing and I did it and all these things, but you said you wouldn't abandon me. And you can be like, well, I said I wouldn't abandon you, but that's dependent on context. And guess what? In this case, this has to happen.
Absolutely. And yeah.
Go ahead.
And just on that part, thinking through what I would do if a friend of mine were accused of a consent violation. I mean, absolutely. I think part of realizing that I was a fallible person myself and capable of doing all of these things and sort of embracing that was trying to bridge that middle ground between you're awesome, I love you, and fuck you. That, that line where you can just accept that other people are human and sometimes you might want to interact with them more and sometimes you might want to interact with them less. And when I open myself up to the possibility of maintaining a friendship with somebody who has done something terribly wrong, I mean, absolutely, there have to be mitigating factors with that. I don't think it's possible for anybody to write the one document that all of us can follow just to be able to do the right thing. And not only because my dear Mr. Baum finds legal loopholes for a living. I mean, something that you have to go with the spirit of the thing. You can't go with the letter of the law and make
I sometimes feel like even that is going too far. We have to go with the intent of the thing.
Okay.
Because sometimes you find out that the spirit of the thing is wrong for the intent. Do you mind if I digress just for a second? Because I kind of want to get your input on something I was actually thinking about this morning as I was trying to go back to sleep.
I'm hoping it's the no apology, but I'm happy for anything.
It's not actually. We can go back to the no apology too. It was thinking about the idea that we all want to be John McClane. We're used to seeing things like Die Hard, where the system doesn't work and it's unfair, and so we have one person who goes in and takes, grabs the bull by the tail and faces the situation,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of the initial reaction, and it's a good intent.
Mm-hmm.
because when somebody hears of a consent issue, if they're accused, a lot of times their first thing is, oh my God, I have to find the person, I have to fix it, I have to apologize to them, I have to talk to them, all these things. Like they want to go and fix it. They want to go and the reality is that John McClane, in the movie, he fixes everything with his gun and his fists and his feet and his sweaty determination.
Yeah.
But in reality, I was thinking about, the examples of the John McClanes in current culture are people like the guy who drove the car into the protesters. It's the guy in Charlottesville who pulled his gun and pointed it at and shot at the ground near protesters. It's the woman in Walmart who pulled a gun on somebody else over school supplies. All those people kind of thought of themselves as, well, I'm going to solve this situation. I'm going to make it, the system is not working.
Yeah.
And the reality is that the people who actually solve or work towards the solutions are people like, and I'm going to bring up another recent thing, is the people who are flying into the hurricane. It was very interesting to me that for I watched some of the video of the hurricane researchers that are working to try and figure out better ways to deal with and predict and things like that for hurricanes, which is great. That's something that in the long term is going to solve lives, but they're not going to solve it. They're just a tiny piece of the puzzle. And even that tiny piece of the puzzle, that airplane that was flying into the eye of the thing, they had 3 people at the controls. They had 2 people like with their hands on the steering yoke or whatever they call it.
Yeah.
And then they had one guy whose job was to do the throttle, and all 3 of them were like totally focused and looking forward. And I was thinking to myself, in a book or a movie, it's John McClane takes over the plane and drives it into the hurricane by himself. And the reality is, it's a team of people that are doing a small part of a giant problem to make it better. And this is kind of why that whole, friend who was reading a book instead of jumping out and trying to do stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the first step is calming down. And the next step is reading a book about communication or something along those lines to increase that kind of stuff.
Yes.
But I feel like we have this, it's endemic to our culture, of the solitary hero going out, taking action and fixing things.
Sure.
When in reality that translates into people causing more problems.
Sure. The first step in solving the problem is not being the singular hero. Ever, really, in actual real life.
So sorry for going off tangent. I realize this is supposed to be a kink, sex, culture podcast, and I guess that counts as culture. There's not a lot of kink and sex in there. Well, here's a final question that does bring it back to kind of sex and things like that, because you are an attractive young woman who enjoys having sexy things happen. Does this improve your sex life, or is it just kind of a, well, I have to do this? I mean, I guess I'm saying there are some people who find condoms really sexy, and some people who find condoms a necessity, but not sexy in and of themselves. And which is this? I mean, is this something that actually improves directly, or is it something that is just necessary because of the other activities you take part in?
I would say it improves things directly for me because I feel confident. I feel more confident in doing what I'm doing, knowing that I'm more prepared. And in terms of people I might consider interacting with or playing with, well, I consider forethought to be sexy. So I am vastly more likely to want to interact with somebody who is able to give a realistic, fallible view of themselves, hopefully like I am trying to do myself, because I feel like we're safer interacting with each other and we can be more open, honest, fallible, vulnerable. And if something does happen, we'll be more prepared. So for me, I'll go a little bit further if we know that we're a little bit more prepared for the risks that we take on with that.
Okay. So do you still, I guess in some ways, it makes it, some people would say, well, this takes all the magic out of the unknown, but I guess actually it's more like you can actually take more risks because you're more prepared for when things go wrong.
That's the hope. I think it's really
Okay.
hard to test that, but
Well, yeah.
I feel more prepared and I feel more responsible doing what I'm doing, knowing that I am not just going out there and trying to be or maintain that perfect hero archetype that, I'm going to do the biggest, best, scariest, bravest thing, and then nothing will ever possibly go wrong. And then everything will work out great. And everyone will think I'm hot, and everyone will like my FetLife pictures, etc. I don't think that's a realistic viewpoint, and I probably wouldn't. If I held that viewpoint, I would not recommend myself as a partner.
Okay. That's fair. Huh. All right. Well, cool. Any final thoughts for people? Or, are people okay to just take it as a template and write their own? Or
Absolutely.
right.
People are beyond welcome to do that, and I would love that. I found it so incredibly valuable for myself that I would recommend it to anybody. It's just an exercise to do. And whether or not you publicly post it or show it to anybody or anything is a very personal decision. It felt right for me.
Mm-hmm. I think it feels right as a presenter and as an event producer. I think both event producers also really should put that up as an event policy, really. What is our policy on an event?
I would very much like to see that, and that was why I broke my quiet silence of that piece I so awkwardly wrote a year ago on the porch when we were talking about it after the most recent set of incidents. The what can we do? Well, I think we can strongly encourage people everywhere to be more prepared, and in specifically relating to our events, make that a requirement. That would be my hope.
Well, yeah, it will definitely be part of the requirement for Ropecraft and for Flow-Erotic. And I'm trying to figure out a way to encourage people at Grooves to do it too. So we'll work on that. Might be something for a newsletter.
I feel like that it takes a lot. It takes a lot of time. So it really is just it has to be a pre-plan. You can't ask somebody to do something in the moment. Right.
Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and taking up your valuable personal time to do this.
It's my daughter's second day of preschool, so
and here you are on the Kink Sex Culture podcast. So yay!
I'm excited. I've been listening for a long time. This is the longest running kinky podcast on the internet, after all.
Wow, that's such a tripping phrase to roll off the tongue.
It is. It makes me smile every time I think about it.
If anybody has any personal questions for you about this thing, can they get in touch with you?
Absolutely.
What's the best way?
I would say let's use my Ropecraft email address.
Okay.
Ozma, OZMA @ropecraft.net.
Got it. All right, wonderful. Well, thanks a lot, and I will see you tomorrow. But
absolutely,
we'll hope to have you again on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Gray, and thanks for listening.
And thanks again to Ryazan for that wonderful reading. It's always helpful when a podcast comes together with the help of a prairie home polycule. And speaking of prairie home polycule, I will be heading off to a different part of the prairie. I will be going to FapCon in October. But of course, before that is Ramblegrew. If you are thinking of going to Ramblegrew, I would suggest that you get your ticket right now, because last I heard there was around 25 tickets left. Although they did also still have the Ramblegrew Rockstar ticket available. Now that's the one, of course, that is 2 people can get it if they want. And if those 2 people split the cost, which is admittedly a bit steep, it's $999.99. If you choose to get the Ramblegrew Rockstar ticket, let me tell you, I personally will come to your cabin, tent, hammock, wherever you are, with the beverage of your choice, coffee, tea, whiskey, whatever you like. Now, if it's whiskey, you're going to have to provide your own whiskey, and I'll just serve it to you. And then I will also serenade you. Now, if you were at Dark Odyssey Summer Camp, you may have gone past Oink and heard some of the serenades that are available. But yes, I do come equipped with a guitar, and I will serenade you while you sip your morning beverage every morning at Ramble Grew for the low cost of $999.99. And you also get both a gold and a silver star on your badge. What a deal. Go to ramblegrew.org and get your ticket now. And we will see you in late September at Ramblewood. Other than that, thank you again to my sponsors, Lee Allure and Twisted Monk. You guys are inspiring with the good work that you do, and I try and emulate that with this podcast. If you have any comments or questions, you can always find me at greydancer@gmail.com. You can also find me at greydancer.com. You can find me on Twitter at greydancer. I'm pretty easy to find, GRAYDANCER. And now I'm back to packing. And remember, when it comes to kink, sex, and culture, it is not always black and white. So you might as well learn how to dance in the gray.